From this to this. Today I'm going to show you how to get more dynamic range on video with older cameras. Today I'm shooting with a Sony 5100, one of my favorite little compact APS-C cameras. I have another one in my hand here, obviously. Flip up screen, great for vlogging, but it's an older camera and the dynamic range isn't that great on these things. So I'm going to show you how I get around that, and it's very possible to do so. The older cameras don't usually come with RAW or log, and I don't like shooting with RAW or log anyway. But there are situations where it's just too contrasty, the highlights are clipped and the shadows are just too black. And that's the problem with a lot of the earlier cameras, they're just too contrasty with their video. So I'm going to show you how to increase your dynamic range. Now right now I'm shooting in the standard picture profile, the way you would get it if you were just to turn it on and push record. The saturation is a little too strong. A lot of times the highlights would be yellow instead of skin colored. So how do we get around that? Well, there's several ways to do it, and that's what this video is about today. In the case of the 5100 and pretty much all Sony cameras, go into the menu and find DRO, which stands for Dynamic Range Optimizer, and put it up to like level 4. The Panasonic Lumix version of this is called iDynamic. What this basically does is it brightens up the shadows. So let's begin by getting out of the standard picture profile and putting it into portrait. There we go. Now we brought up some of the shadow detail. Now DRO does not really bring down the highlights, it brings up the shadows. The trade-off in this situation is if you do it too much, you get a little bit of noise in the shadows, which I don't really care about. I just want proper exposure. Now you could take it a step further like I've done here by going into your creative style settings, in this case portrait, and going contrast -3, saturation -3, and it gives you a flatter profile. And then later on in editing, you bring back your saturation and your contrast as to per your liking. I don't like to do a lot of post work. I like to get it right in the camera. So I like to have this, for example. This is my normal setting. It's just portrait 000. And I basically bring a dynamic range optimizer, DRO, level 4 or 5, whatever, and bring down the exposure. And then you could bring up the exposure later on if you want to, if you need to make it just right. But it's better to have a little underexposed when you're shooting it than to have it overexposed, because you can always brighten it up a little bit in post. You can't bring back the highlights once they've been clipped. So this is how I like to work. Now there's another way to make this work with this camera. This, my friends, is HDR. What it does is it takes dual exposures per frame, one that's bright and one that's dark, and it blends them together dynamically on the fly as it's taking the video. So it's more processor intensive. It's kind of like taking in still pictures where you take multiple exposures, one in the middle, one that's too bright and one that's too dark, and then you mix them together. It's like that, but it's not actually taking 3 different pictures. It's taking dual exposures and blending it. It's still more work for the processor, so it does create more heat. HDR is good for when the camera is locked off on the tripod and you're not moving too much. If you move a lot, then it's going to be weird, but if you just kind of stay still like a talking head like now, it should be pretty good. So this is HDR. It can give you very balanced exposures right out of the camera. It's automatic. You don't have to think about it. Very little grading work needed, if at all. It creates more heat, so your camera can't run very long before overheating. Maybe for 5-minute videos, but not for 20-minute videos. The other method, DRO, which is this, gives you more control. You can actually control the exposures more, the shadows levels, the highlight levels. So you actually bring down the highlight as much as you want. You bring up the shadows as much as you want, and the saturation and all that. So you have more control of this. It doesn't overheat the camera as much. The only downside to DRO is you get a little bit of noise sometimes in the shadows. So to avoid that, don't put your ISO over 3200. In this case, it's only 1250, so that's pretty good. I generally like to use DRO to bring up the detail in the shadows and underexpose a little bit to bring down the clipping and the highlights. And of course, if it's too saturated, you could always go into the creative style and desaturate it a little bit, and then you could bring it back later on if you wanted. Again, I don't like to do a lot of post work, but anyway, this is one way with older cameras to get a really nice look, more dynamic range when you're doing videos. yeah, you can get more dynamic range. Now it is 8-bit, it's not 10-bit, so you can't push it too far, but the secret to all good video and photography is to get the exposure right away in camera as you're shooting. And once you have the exposure right, life's a lot easier and a lot better. Well, I hope you got something out of this. I enjoy making these videos. I hope you enjoy watching them. Okay, well, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.